Welcome back to another video tutorial brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. Today I'm going to show you how to do an acrylic transfer. We're going to start off with some watercolor paper here. You'll also need a photocopy of the image that you'd like to transfer, a couple brushes, a spray bottle with some water in it. You also need some acrylic gesso and some acrylic gel medium. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the gesso and I'm going to cover the watercolor paper. Acrylic transfer is an incredibly easy process to do, and you can create some really interesting and beautiful pieces of artwork. And I'm using watercolor paper like I said, but you can use any surface that you want. Anything that the acrylic really can adhere to, you can use this process on. So I'm just going to give it a good coat of gesso. And I'm going to put my brush strokes, I'm going to make my brush strokes go back and forth kind of in a cross-hatching technique to kind of build up a texture on the surface. So once the entire surface is covered with gesso, I'm going to let that dry. And after it's had time to dry, I will go back over the top of it with some layers of transparent acrylic. And for this demonstration, I'm using some bronze metallic acrylic paint, and I've thinned it out quite a bit. I really want to create some transparent layers. So I'm going to put several layers of washes of the acrylic paint on the surface. And I'm also thinking about my brush strokes when I'm doing that. I'm trying to create that cross-hatch texture on the surface to really give the surface some depth. You can add whatever colors you want when you're doing this. It doesn't really matter. You can forgo this completely if you want, and you can just do the transfer onto the gessoed surface. But I'm doing this just to add some interest. I'm also going to add some texture to the surface with the end of my brush. You can really use any material that you want. Next, I'm going to tear the paper around the edges of my image. I want that rough texture around the edge. I'm going to tear it out. You don't have to do it this way. You can cut it out with scissors or with an X-Acto knife. Once I've got it completely torn out or cut out, I'm going to arrange it on the paper just to make sure it fits and put it in the place that I want it to be. In this case, I'm going to make this a vertical composition, and it's going to look good in the center, so that's where I'm going to put it. Next, I'll take the acrylic gel medium, and with a brush or palette knife, you'll want to just cover the area that you want to put the transfer. So I'm just going to cover the entire area that I want the transfer to be. And I'm going to put a liberal amount on there as well. So you're going to put a good amount of that acrylic transfer, that acrylic gel medium, where you want your transfer to be. Next, I'm going to take my photocopy and put it face down onto the gel medium. And once it's down, you don't really want to move it around. But you do want to take your fingers and kind of adhere it to the surface. Next, you're going to want to let that dry, and you really want to let it sit overnight, or at least for a few hours. I'm using a heat gun to speed up the drying time, so I'm going to heat it on the back and the front. You might use a hair dryer if you don't have a heat gun. Then once it's dry, I'm going to use a spray bottle, and I'm going to liberally spray the surface with the water. And you'll see your transfer kind of come through the paper. You'll want to give it a minute and let the water soak into the paper. Then you'll need to take a rag or your fingers and start to remove the paper. And this process might take a little bit of time. You'll want to be careful and remove the paper gently so that you don't remove the ink, but instead just the paper. So you'll add some more water, let the water soak in a little bit, and then remove it. And as you remove the paper, you'll start to see your transfer appear. And it may take a couple times going through this process to really remove all of the paper. And once you have all your paper removed, you can take a cloth and wipe off all the excess water, all the excess little pieces of paper too that might be left. And you've got your image transferred. Now in this case, I'm going to embellish it a little bit with some more acrylic paint. And you can do any type of embellishment that you want. But I'm just going to kind of paint a little border around my image. You can paint right on the top of this if you want. You can use colored pencils, oil pastels, really anything that you want. So be creative with it. And that's basically it. And that's how you use acrylic gel medium to create a photo transfer. It's very easy, and it'll help you create some really interesting and cool pieces of artwork. Hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com.